Well, thank you all very much, and it's really great to see you all after having been away from Bangladesh for a few years. I was hoping to be back sooner, but because of the pandemic, obviously we've all been restricted in our ability to travel around, so it's really wonderful to be back here in Bangladesh, the country of my birth, and the place that I feel a very close affinity to. And it's a great source of pride that I've been able to do the role of trade envoy for the UK over the last few years. During the pandemic, although we've not been able to do as much directly by being here, I've retained a strong interest in what's happened here in Bangladesh beyond the UK's trading relationship, alongside focusing on what the key opportunities are as well as challenges. And I know that the High Commissioner with the team here have played a really important role, both facing Bangladesh but also supporting our constituents in the UK. And I want to start off by thanking all those involved in supporting our constituents to return to Bangladesh. And of course, Biman Airlines was involved in the repatriation and so on. But also the garment sector is very important to Bangladesh. I'm very acutely aware, and I'm glad to see that those businesses are back on form again. In terms of the work we've been doing in relation to trade, I know that there have been a number of ministers who paid visits here. The Honourable Prime Minister, during her visit to Bangladesh last year on the 50th anniversary of Bangladesh's independence, addressed parliamentarians at a joint event in the Foreign and Commonwealth Office that I co-hosted last November. And so as we look to the last 50 years and the important anniversary that was celebrated last year and continues to be celebrated, of course, and the advancement Bangladesh has made both in economic and social development terms, this is a really important moment for us to look at how Britain and Bangladesh can work together and deepen our ties, both people-to-people ties, which are very strong, of course strong diplomatic ties, but also economic ties and trading relationships. We have good, strong links. I want to see that grow. I want to see more British businesses engage here in this country. And as part of that, of course, it's very important to make sure that the business climate within which they operate is conducive to more investment, more engagement, and more participation by businesses from the UK. And that's one of the things that I've worked on and will continue to work on. Thank you. I'll stop there.
My name is Vishu. I'm working for Jammu. My question is about, so far we know UK is the second largest foreign direct investor here in Bangladesh. US is the first. So how do we evaluate the present situation of investment scenario in Bangladesh, especially after 2 years of COVID pandemic? And what's the reaction from the investor of UK about the overall?
You will all know the pandemic's been a big challenge for many countries, the UK as well as Bangladesh. And most economies took a hit during the restrictions, including ours in the UK. And as things have opened up, the economic growth has bounced back in different levels in different countries, and that's not different. That's no different here, and it's very encouraging to see economic activity. Bangladesh has had, over a long period of time, very encouraging growth numbers, which are, an envy to other parts of the world, particularly those countries that have had anemic growth after the global financial crisis, for instance. So those are encouraging stories about Bangladesh. Obviously, there are winners and losers from the pandemic in our country as well as this country. And so it's really important that the economic growth that happens in many countries, including here, is an inclusive one. And those are debates we're having in the UK as well. There's a sort of levelling up agenda. There's the sort of bounce back agenda in thinking about how we avoid leaving people behind. And that's where I think the economic relationships between countries is really important. How do we make sure that our economies, the UK has had a set of challenges post-Brexit, How do we make sure we build new relationships that will enable us to, not just with Bangladesh, but many other countries, to prosper? And our companies, we've got some brilliant companies and also public institutions, higher education institutions, which is an area where I think we could do a lot more together. Tech, finance, insurance, banking, many other fields. Service sector, of course, generally. Public sector, the public sector has a lot to offer. I mean, if you look at the vaccine that the UK produced, Oxford University collaborated with AstraZeneca. So there are many areas where we can do more for prosperity for this country as well as Bangladesh. Your question about what needs to happen, what are the things that need to happen? Well, you'll be very familiar with the sort of common issues and challenges. You need a really good, effective business sort of climate where the barriers to entry are removed, and that's different for different countries. And I think that senior figures in this country are very well aware of what they are, and I believe that there is a very keen interest in addressing those and those issues that we continue to highlight. There are obviously important issues around governance. Good governance is an important framework within which businesses want to operate and wish to operate. So there are general conditions that are important for any business to operate, domestic and international. And I know that obviously we have a number of British businesses who've been involved in this country for a very long time. We just visited Intertech just a few hours before addressing you here. And they're doing brilliant work in supporting, as a British company, testing for the garment sector and other sectors, and safety and standards, which are vital for exports by Bangladesh to the rest of the world, and fulfilling regulatory standards. So that's a good example of where a British company is helping with underpinning the work that's being done in terms of exports. So there's lots of collaborations that really can make a difference and can enable success. So we see our role as, I'd say, as making sure that those partnerships are fruitful and they help to increase opportunity, create more jobs. I'm somebody, I was Shadow Minister for Education. I was also Shadow International Development Minister and took a very keen interest in how those agendas make a difference. And I think, economic development and growth that's inclusive can be even more beneficial sometimes than individual projects, although individual projects are very important and aid efforts are very important, but looking at how you link support with economic development, education, primary all the way to higher education into the world of work is vital. These are not unique issues for Bangladesh. There's a lot we can learn from Bangladesh, and we do, but Bangladesh, to achieve its ambition for the next 50 years in terms of further rapid growth, is gonna need to look at that and look at how it attracts more investment and more businesses into this country.
So, what do you think? You just noticed some challenges in Bangladesh.
I think that it depends on the sector that's trying to come in. Each sector will have its own issues. So, if you're trying to create an infrastructure for financial services, for instance, it's going to require a set of things that takes time to build, and it requires a careful look at the regulatory framework, for instance. The UK has a very, very mature financial services sector, but it's taken a very long time to create it. So it can be sector specific, but also there are overarching issues which are about removing anti-competitive practices, for instance. There are some industries that are much more closed, much more domestically harnessed, if you like, and there isn't external competition. But competition can be a very good thing, not sort of flooding goods in and then killing off industries. I'm not talking about that, but if you look at garments, the fact that garments companies are exporting and they're subject to the sort of stringent requirements and regulatory framework that they have to meet to export means that the supply of goods is competing with other countries, including China, and Bangladesh has overtaken many countries. So that's an interesting and good positive example. But one of the things that's obvious is that during the pandemic, what became clear for many economies, not just this one, is that if you're just dependent on one type of export in particular that's dominant, then you're going to be much more vulnerable. So it's really important to diversify. And I think that's a point that's well understood by people here, much better understood than elsewhere.
But this is your third
before the pandemic.
Yeah. This is your more than 3 visits as an envoy in Dhaka. So how do you find the first visit different between the first visit to the third visit, and what do you want to see in the next visit? I mean, and what are the points you want to make fulfill by 1 year or 2 years?
So when I first arrived here, just to take the UK side, for instance, we have UK export finance, and from at the beginning there was a small amount that was announced by the UK government in terms of export finance guarantees for British businesses that wanted to operate here. Now it's something like 2.5 billion, for instance, of export guarantees, which is a signal of how important the UK sees this economy as being, and the potential for potential benefits for British businesses. The other thing that we have is what was the Commonwealth Development Corporation, now it's got a new name.
British Investment International.
British Investment International is really looking closely at what sort of sectors to invest in to support. And I've been pushing them, as I know High Commissioner has and others have, to really get into Bangladesh and look at what else can be done. They've had a long presence here, and we want to see those agencies, British agencies, do more to support businesses, entrepreneurialism here, but also and ensure there's cross-fertilization, because don't forget we've got over 600,000 British Bangladeshis, many of them are in industry, can make a contribution, and then you've got the major businesses that want to operate here. So those sorts of provisions are very important, and increasing the level of awareness and interest in the UK, which is one of my tasks, among ministers. There's a lot of goodwill towards Bangladesh, and the reception that the Bangladeshi delegation got in the UK is a case in point in what we all do collectively, across parties often, to ensure that Bangladesh has a strong voice, can punch above its weight in terms of making the case for strong links and support in both directions. So I think that what I'd like to see, so that's on the UK side, making sure that the British government sees the huge opportunities here for UK business, but also in terms of relationships, because we've got a really strong, long-held relationship and levels of trust, levels of affection and affinity that is not easy to gain, actually. It takes a long time. And that's credit to, I'd say that's credit to many generations, including my parents' generation, who went to the UK before my father was there before the War of Independence, and the British Bangladeshi community, who made sure that mainstream society really understood what this country that they were trying to create was going to be about. A country of ideals, of democracy and human rights and freedom. And those ideals have to be constantly worked at. On this side, of course, on the Bangladesh side, what I hope to see, I have seen more companies over the years come here. We keep discovering new ones. Some of them come with, engagement with the High Commission. Some of them come into contact with me. And there are others who are organically getting involved and doing business here. So we are seeing that, but I'd like to see that happening on a bigger scale. That requires much closer partnership to look at where the barriers are and working together to make sure the barriers are removed. And those are well documented in various, external reports and so on. ease of doing business
Can I
is a
come to
major
know what are the
ease.
barriers
Well,
with-
ease of doing business is a big issue for this country. So having graduating from LDC status and some of the changes, losing the some of the preference arrangements in due course will require over the coming years preparation for making sure that those barriers are removed so that Bangladesh can attract the investment that it absolutely needs and is going to benefit from, and attract the business and business communities that could do a lot and could help support prosperity in this country. It's in this country's interest to do so. And it's in our interest to work together to make that happen, in our mutual interest.
As it is well documented, can you point out something?
Well, I mean, as I say, ease of doing business is a big one. Navigating through different sort of regulatory arrangements here is quite complex for businesses that are not used to operating here. It's not a country that certain businesses in the UK would have considered in the past. So some of it will be about knowledge and awareness. And I know that in last year when there was a delegation, they did road shows and so on to increase awareness about the opportunities here. And that's a really great start. The next stage is to look sector by sector at some of the issues that companies face and help to address them. And I know there are various organisations that try to do that. There are intermediaries. It needs to be the right sort of fit and quality so that people can engage and work effectively here.
So there are actually a number of things. A lot of things have changed during this time. We changed, and what is your message to the Bangladesh authorities that you are trying to give during this visit? So this is number one. The other one is that UK has been trying, I think, to open up UK universities in Bangladesh,
Yep.
and what is the status of that?
Yes, well, I think it's a really, first of all, on UK universities, I was going to say that's one of the areas where I think we could do a lot more. And so I'm going to be attending a conference tomorrow. I hope to be meeting with the education minister. I did meet a delegation of officials as well as one of the other ministers for education during a visit to the UK to raise some of the issues. And there are some issues around getting the approval for locating here. British universities, by and large, are not interested in setting up campuses here. Then that's not what they're about. They're interested in partnership and collaboration. And there are big opportunities around research and innovation. There are big opportunities for the population here if they have access to international universities, but also big opportunities for research, which means that research ratings can go up, and then Bangladeshi universities have a much better chance. So we would think of having some universities become among the top 1,000 in the world. At the moment, there isn't one in that category, but there's no reason why it shouldn't be. Other countries have done it. So I'm very ambitious for Bangladesh. I'm very ambitious for education in Bangladesh, not least because it's a country that was among the key countries that reached the Millennium Development Goals on girls' education, for instance. So there's a lot to be proud of, but there's a lot more to do. And when you look at industry, and these are issues we grapple with in the UK as well, when you're looking at industry and you want to see, the education level and then people being trained, fit for and ready for the world of work as it's changing with more automation, with more need for technical vocational education, then there's a lot we can all learn from each other by collaborating and having universities come together. So I think that there are some regulatory issues that will need to be addressed, which we have raised and we will continue to raise, so that the climate is conducive to universities being able to be here. There are a number of universities who've expressed an interest, and I've held roundtables that the High Commissioner has hosted, so I very much hope we can do that, because I think that will be really beneficial. There are students now going from Bangladesh to study in the UK. That's a good thing, but we don't want a brain drain either. We want students to be able to, also who can't afford, it's very expensive, who can't afford to go and study abroad, but they can study with the influence of universities that they might have wanted to go to that can also provide educational opportunities, working with local universities to do that. And I think we all gain from that. We have a labour shortage in the UK as well, of course. So there are lots of benefits of making sure that there are the curricula is one that can seamlessly exchange between the two. So these are issues we'll raise, and I think there's a big opportunity here.
May I add one thing here? Except regulatory issues, what are the major obstacles to establish a goodwill among the leaders of Bangladesh, especially the policymakers of Minister of Education?
Yeah, there is interest. There is interest for sure. Well, I haven't had the meeting yet, but we'll feedback after tomorrow. But I think there's a lot of interest. I don't know if you wanted to add anything to.
I mean, I think there's interest in principle, but a number of different bodies have to be aligned, including the Ministry of Education and the University Grants Commission. And for the last several years, while British universities have been very actively looking at the market here and very excited by the scale and the growth, we haven't been able to line up all the permissions that are needed under the rules that govern the implementation of the Cross-Border Higher Education Act.
How do you think that there's a Bangladesh is graduating? So, is there any chance, or how you?
Where we are on that?
Well, I think if I'm honest, we're some way from a fully fledged FTA, but there's a lot we can do in the meantime to talk in terms of market access barriers. And what we did was launch a trade dialogue last year, and Krishnara Ali and I will be seeing the Commerce Minister during her visit and talking about how we can make most use of the trade dialogue to improve trade between us as a first step towards an FTA. And I think an FTA would obviously be an ultimate objective, but is for the medium or longer term.
So my second question.
Mutually exclusive, they shouldn't be. It's really important to respect human rights and protect democracy and democratic values. And these are, you have to constantly work at these things. They're not static. And so, and of course, businesses tend to withdraw from when there are major issues of human rights violations, or they will find pressure from citizens, quite correctly, if there are human rights violations. So it has a knock-on effect on the economics. Myanmar, another country that I take a close interest in, and I chair the all-party group on democracy in Burma, where for a very long time it became, even as things opened up, there were human rights violations, and many businesses, although in theory could operate there, chose not to. So it's very important to uphold human rights and protect them. And all of that is interconnected to a good environment for businesses to operate. And our businesses have shareholders that are very vocal. So they are not independent of the democratic space within which they operate in their own country.
How
so
is
it's very important.
The current situation of Bangladesh regarding these two issues?
Well, I think that that there are obviously issues that need to be addressed. Many countries have issues around human rights that they need to address, and I know that our government has, as a critical friend of the government here, have regularly raised issues that are of concern. And as for, of course, the other area that is really important is making sure that there are free and fair elections, and that the democratic process is protected, and that there's integrity in that system, and that's something that we've never shied away from. I've never shied away from, and ultimately, of course, it's a matter for the people of Bangladesh where there are areas that need to be addressed. They should be.
You closely watch this Rohingya crisis in Myanmar, especially. What is the UK policy change?
On this issue, I first went to Rakhine State in 2013 and raised concerns about what was happening and the danger of this happening, getting worse. And at the time, I think there was probably, it was probably, with the benefit of hindsight, and of course hindsight's a good thing, it probably would have been better for a greater focus in the international community to think about how those rights could be protected. But we are unfortunately where we are. And I think what's recently been encouraging to see is that the UK government certainly done a lot more around sanctions. My parliamentary groups, I chair 2 parliamentary groups, one of them with the former Foreign Secretary, Jeremy Hunt. It's a cross-party parliamentary group, the Rights of Rohingya. And we've campaigned for tougher sanctions against Myanmar together. And I'm glad to see some of that is happening. We've also campaigned for the international community to support the humanitarian effort, because obviously when you've got one crisis after another, you know, you've got multiple crises. Now we've got the Ukrainian crisis. It's important that the world doesn't forget the plight of the Rohingya here, which is why I'm going back to Cox's Bazar. I went there in 2018 as well. It's really important that the host countries are not left to respond when time passes, that the international community takes responsibility. So the sanctions part is very important. Obviously, since all of this started, you've had a military coup, and so this fledgling democracy, with all its imperfections, is now, a military dictatorship again. So I think there needs to be pressure at this end within the region, of course, and I understand there is some pressure, but we need to, and we will continue to do so as parliamentarians in the UK, keep the pressure on our government to take a leadership role, and I think they are much more so now in terms of sanctions. And one of the other things is of course, we are looking at, in the UK Parliament, we're looking at Ukraine, we're looking at the way in which the world community in different ways has come together and unified in terms of applying sanctions against the Russian government. So it shows that when there is the political will, quite a lot can be done. So those are examples that some of my colleagues have started to use to encourage our government to do whatever they can to keep the pressure on the Burmese military. And that they don't profit as well. There are military-owned companies and so on. So there are various issues and there are various ways in which parliamentarians are trying to exert pressure, but it requires parliamentarians around the world. And I know that there is a group of parliamentarians across the world who get together regularly to look at how they can support Burmese activists who are fighting very hard to try and regain control in a democrat, and then return to democracy. But one of the issues that I've raised continually is, of course, that there needs to be much more unity, and protection of minorities has got to be central in terms of the national unity government that's sort of formed following this coup.
Excellency, there are global precision. So, do you have any observation about this?
I think it's always important to have a diverse source of development funding. And I think, if you look at, I actually think, sorry if I can, I think Bangladesh has been very astute in this way, in that, you have development funding from Japan, you have development funding from the UK, from the European Union, from the international financial institutions, from the US, and of course from a large country to the north. So, I think that diversity is very important, because I think it is fair to say that we've seen examples elsewhere in the region that being over-dependent on one source for development funding can have a very negative effect on countries' overall development. So I think your point is a good one, but I think my own feeling, as someone who's been in Bangladesh for a while, is that actually Bangladesh has been very astute in avoiding that problem.
And seems to have good relationships with a number of countries. But I think, this is also a country that many development partners have wanted to operate in historically, because there's so much entrepreneurialism and social entrepreneurism, and NGOs doing great work, poverty alleviation work that has happened over decades. So it tends to attract, certainly the UK government, when my party, the Labour Party, was in power, was very keen to make sure that our aid effort was also here. And that hasn't gone away, the enthusiasm from lots of European countries as well.
We've got time for one more, I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
Madam Ali, I have a simple question.
In British Airways is a private company. I entirely agree that it was very good. We had, British Airways ran 12 repatriation flights 2 years ago, when we had that operation going on. But British Airways is a private company, as Rushnara observes, and it's up to them. It's not up to the government where British Airways flies. British Airways is a completely independent private company, and I'm sure they will be looking at this market just like they look at every market. And if they think they can make a profit here, they would be happy to consider it. But as far as I'm aware, there's no current plan for them to return, much though many of us might welcome it. Great. Yeah, one more.
You have a very big, busy schedule here. Do you have any plan to visit any political party, or politics is one part of the business? So, is there any schedule regarding the with our political?
I have a day of visit to Cox's Bazar, but I have had meetings in the past. When I've come in an independent capacity rather than an official visit, and have links with people in different political parties,
Just one thing we missed in the.
My experience is very good, but
as a BNB,
that's different. That's not good. That's not a representative.
No, I mean I think we all recognise that every service in every part of life can always be improved. And I think the airport would probably be included in that.
About the third phase.
I think the third terminal is a huge opportunity
it's
to
a big
improve the
opportunity.
whole way that the airports are run here.
The last time I was here, I didn't see, the airport hadn't started to, the terminal hadn't started to be built, and this time it's already
It's very
there,
impressive.
ready.
But I think what will be important, I mean, if I could just note, I think the hardware is already taking shape. What will be important is that the software is as good, is as impressive as the hardware, so that a really world-class airport terminal is matched by really world-class services. And I think what would be good to see would be maybe some competition in terms of provision of those services.
Thank you very much.